everybody. All right, so now in 1844, the Menomonee River attracted businessmen because of its power possibilities. Those possibilities are gone now, probably never to return because of the decreased flow of water. But back in the day, oh, there you go. Now this, I don't know if you can figure this out. Here's the river. This is what we're going to follow. Right down here, here's Main Street. There's Water Street. Okay, just to give you an idea. There you go. So now, back in the day on our river, the water power of 3 dams were used by 4 different businesses. We had 2 grist mills. There was a sawmill at the gorge of the river. There was a sash, door, and woodworking factory at the west end of the dam. Excuse me. There was a stave factory and a cooper shop that made hardwood barrels for the local market and flour mills in Milwaukee and Cedarburg. And then there was our lime kilns. Because of our river, men located here because of an opportunity to transact business and to make a living. Welcome to Up a Lazy River, part 2 in a series of streets of Old Menomonee Falls. We're actually not going to go up this lazy river, but we're going to start at the top of the river, almost to the county line, and we're going to work our way downstream, following the flow of the water. Here's a better pic. Here's the regular pic, and you see there's the river. We're going to start with the sugar beet factory. We're going to go on down for the Gettleman Hotel and the Monitor House. We're going to talk about the lumber yard, 3rd Street Bridge. We're going to talk about the Huberty families and the Mace families. And we're going to talk about the lime kilns, just this whole area here to give you an idea. So to get our bearings, picture yourself on the Main Street Bridge, right in the middle of town. The first street east of that is what? Water Street. It's Water Street. And from here, we need to travel north on Water Street to get to our starting destination. Now, Water Street was constructed in 1843, and it got its name because of its location near the Menomonee River, and it is the oldest residential street in the village and contains the largest concentration of pre-Civil War houses in the village. It is such an old street that even the house numbers are a little bit different than the rest of the village. They seem to be short in number, which is a never-ending, they're short in number, and the police station really has a fit when you try and call. You're giving us the wrong number? No, that's really the house number. So we're going to start our journey almost to where the expressway is now. We're going to board a little excursion boat, and we're going to drift south a bit to what is now the KC Clubhouse. FYI, the original building where the KC Clubhouse is now was originally a log cabin, and that log cabin was the very first schoolhouse for the children in the village. Anyway, but we're going to talk about the time when this building was part of $1 million sugar beet industry. Long before they started building the sugar beet factory, elaborate plans had been drafted in the Milwaukee offices of the Richter Foundry Company, who were the original backers of this enterprise. At the same time, soil samples were being tested in different parts of the state to ascertain what sections were best for growing sugar beets. These tests showed that the eastern section, a strip of about 35 miles wide along the shores of Lake Michigan, gave the greatest promise of success. Washington and Waukesha counties could also be adapted to growing sugar beets as a cash crop. Menomonee Falls was decided upon as the logical point for the location of the first sugar beet factory east of the Mississippi River. Even before actual building could be started, Carl Korn, who was the original designer, and Julius Youngblood had to canvass the countryside, getting contracts from the local farmers. Their headquarters were at the Eagle Hotel, then owned and operated by Francis Walterlin. Every morning and noon for many weeks during 1895, Mr. Walterlin accompanied the 2 men into the country on their tremendous task to secure acreage for the plant. The industry itself and the culture of the sugar beet was totally new, not only in this area, but over the entire country. The farmers were reluctant to sign up on this proposition, and they especially objected to binding themselves to raising a crop for a period of 10 years. Now, all contracts of this type were on a 10-year basis back then, and for good reason. A lot of money was needed to build this plant, and the possibility of a crop failure the first year or 2 was a real threat. Unfavorable weather conditions or the inexperience of the farmer in raising this new crop might prove discouraging and endanger this new industry. This resulted in the farmers agreeing to sign only small contracts, 1 or 2 acres. So this meant many weary days of soliciting to secure sufficient acreage for a successful operation. One day in the month of August, 1895, there came to the village a pretentious-looking gentleman riding a Western bucking bronco. He put up at the Eagle Hotel and spent much of his time sitting on the bench on the north side of that hostelry or up at the news office. Occasionally, he would mount that bucking bronco and he would go into the countryside, but he'd usually return within a few hours. He remained in our village for 6 weeks, and not until about a week before his departure did he reveal who he was or the purpose of his extended visit. His name was Dr. Hans Maria von Kadig. He was a man of about 55, and he was a special correspondent for a German newspaper. And he was here in our village to investigate the beet sugar industry for German capitalists. Now, construction of the plant was begun early in 1895, but the plans had been considerably modified, and the plant size was greatly reduced from that first drawing. Making the building smaller in size was needed because it was so difficult to get enough land for a large factory. The first crop was harvested in the fall of 1896, and because the plant itself would not be complete until early February of 1897, the crop was delivered to the grounds of the plant, and some 15,000 tons of beets were stored in the trenches. Weather conditions were very unfavorable that winter, there being successive freezes and thaws, and many of the beets either heated and rotted in those trenches or they started to grow. Now, because of these delays, this first crop was unfit for the manufacture of sugar. The many tons that were not spoiled were hauled back to the farms and fed to the cattle. Only about 1 barrel of sugar made it in that test run of the plant. It was of poor quality, as might well be expected under the circumstances. Now, understandably, management became quite anxious. Guards were placed at the gates. No one, not directly connected with the plant or its operation, was permitted on the grounds. Such was the first attempt to establish the sugar beet industry. But all was not lost. R.G. Wagner, an engineer in the bridge and iron business from North Milwaukee, became interested in the venture. He purchased the plant, he enlarged it, and then he met with all sorts of difficulties. Not the least among these was the refusal of the farmers to raise crops of sugar beets, seeing as how none of them received any pay for their previous crop. The local businessmen, apprehensive of failure, volunteered and actually leased land and raised several hundred acres of sugar beets for the plant. The venture yielded no direct profit, but it helped the plant at a moment when it seemed face to face with certain failure. Now, this picture here, this is an 18-acre field. This is an 18-acre field that was owned by Francis Walterlin. He was one of the businessmen that was bound and determined to make the sugar beet factory a success. Now, sugar beet production ultimately became a $1 million industry. Look at all sugar beets. Look at all that. We've got the railroad and the cars. Okay, the next one, the factory used beet seeds that were raised in Germany and purchased by the factory for the farmers in this area. Because of Hans? I don't know, who knows, maybe. Next one. When the farmers brought their beets into the factory for processing, they received $6 to $8 per ton of beets. Now today that would be about $270. Now all field work was done by hand and brought much employment to the local area. Okay. Now this is where they were bringing their sugar beets to the factory. I just love that. We got all the horses on the, and look at this. This is one of the old gas lamps that we used to have in town. Isn't that neat? Now this is one of my favorite pics. So here we got all the sugar beets, we got the rail, here we got one of the carts, and there's a man. See him? And he's holding, I don't know if I'd want to do that. That's quite the carnival ride. Okay, next. So now workers were picked up at several prescribed meeting places by the farmers for whom they would be working and taken by farm wagon to the fields. These workers hoed, weeded, and thinned out the plants for 12 hours a day in the early part of the growing season. Now 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. with time out for lunch that the workers brought with them from home. And harvesting was pulling up the beets and cutting off the ends. There being no child labor laws, adults and children alike worked for 30 cents a day, which would be a little under $15 today. Now, most village kids back then wouldn't miss a summer working in the sugar beet field. They were called the sugar beet gangs. And the older ones with the hoes were bunchers, and the younger ones were thinners. This is a picture of Maria and Lydia Schneeberg around 1900. They're 10 and 12 years old, respectively. They worked in the fields. They were in the sugar beet gang. Now, in 1914, there was an interesting notice in the local paper that read, "The large number of children brought to the country to work the beet fields has led to an investigation on the part of the Labor Bureau and truancy officers in and about the area. They will be apt to learn that the child labor law does not apply to this healthy exercise out of doors. And as far as school attendance is concerned, the children have not neglected their schooling through the winter months." Now this field, right here, this is the sugar beet acreage from the Arthur Triller farm, and it's just west of Old Falls Village. Now there's an interesting story that goes with this. Now Lillian Seward, her maiden name was Schlafer. She was the daughter of Simon Peter Schlafer, and she was the sister of Maud Schunk, our original librarian. When she was young, she decided she wanted to go with her friends and work in the beet fields. This is the beet field she worked in. Now, she was a child of privilege. Her father had a buck or two. He owned one of the mills right on Main Street. So she didn't really have to work, but she wanted to go with her friends. So by the second day, she passed in the middle of the field. They had to pick her up and take her home, and that was the end of that. So, okay, next. So now the factory operation was from October to December and could produce anywhere from 15 million to 40 million pounds of sugar. Now, even though the factory operated only 3 months a year, they employed some 400 to 500 men for 12-hour shifts. The men got paid 16 to 25 cents an hour, which would be $6 to $7 an hour today. The processing plant ran 24 hours a day and was 5 stories tall and stood on the east bank of the Menomonee River just west of Water Street. Even in the summer, before harvesting began, the plant would retain about 20 men just for maintenance. A new 200-foot-high chimney was installed at the sugar mill in July of 1910. It took 2 months to construct and was one of the largest around this section of the country. It was 14 feet in diameter at the base and 9 feet at the top. The Monitor House across the street boarded most of the workers. It is said that the beds there never got cold. As one 12-hour shift ended, another started. Nobody's home, we're all at the library. Okay. So here. Come on, Laura. We're good. Ask them if they want to come up to the presentation. They're late, but they can still get it. Okay, so this is, I love Monitor House, H-O-U-S. M-O-U-S? What in the world? We can't spell very well, can we? We can board by the day or week. Rates are reasonable. Choice wine, liquors, and cigars constantly on hand. Oh, lovely. All right. It's right next to Otzelberger's. Yeah, and it's still there. It's still there right now. Yeah. Now I believe it's apartments now. It's apartments now. Okay, next. Now in 1913, Joseph Holston, along with John Anderson, owner of the Gettleman Hotel next door, and John Weber, owner of the Empire Hotel down the street, were charged with selling liquor to minors under the age of 17. Kids these days, I'm telling you. Each pleaded not guilty and posted a $150 bond. Next one. The Monitor House and the, oh, so here we go. So they were charged. They were bound over. So the more things change, the more they stay the same, I guess. Okay, next. Okay, so that's Gettleman Hotel or Otzelberger's. So it's Otzelberger's. This is the Monitor House right next door. Now, a lot of people think that this is the depot. This is not. This is the Waukesha County Milk Company. This is where they would deliver their milk. Our train depot is across the street, like over here. So the Monitor House and the Gettleman Hotel, both across the street from the sugar beet factory, they would send hot noontime lunches over to the factory workers. and they would be delivered by children using coaster wagons or lunch baskets carried over broomstick handles or in peach baskets. These lunches consisted of coffee and cream in quart fruit jars. Soup was put in earthenware containers covered with pottery plates, and sandwiches were included. It was necessary to carefully balance the food while the delivery was made. Going over the railroad tracks, the wagons had to be picked up while crossing, and a windy day or a hurried move by a child could have upset the apple cart, so to speak. It's a Hotel Gettleman. So now, in 1920, when cane sugar became preferable to beet sugar, the factory made the necessary adjustments by purchasing and installing the needed equipment. This enabled the company to carry on an all-year operation with little to no interruption between beet season and sugarcane processing. We were the first in the country to refine white sugar from Cuban raw cane sugar. A huge metal-roofed concrete warehouse was built to store the raw cane, and year-round employees were hired and processing began. In December of 1923, the sugar company found its night watchman dead at the plant. Nothing nefarious, he just apparently had a heart attack during the night while he was on duty. Jacob Denler Sr. was found at 7 a.m. with his nightstick clutched in his hands, in a sitting position in a chair at the outer door of the plant. He was 67 years old and spent his last night on earth doing his job, guarding the plant. There's his whole obituary. 1924 saw the company lose over $1 million on the raw Cuban cane sugar adventure, and they closed. The Menomonee River, nope, too far ahead. Next one, back. There we go. The Menomonee River Sugar Company then bought the business, and in February of 1924 held a meeting at the Eagle Hotel with about 50 other businessmen from the Falls under the auspices of the Advancement Association. Who can tell me what the Advancement Association turned into? Hello? Nobody's home. We're all at the library. Does anybody know what the Advancement Association is? It's Advancement Association.
Chamber of Commerce?
Chamber of Commerce. Very good, very good. Advancement Association eventually turned into the Chamber of Commerce. The local men were pleased to meet G.W. McCormick and his associates, who were all 20 years experienced and able men in the sugar business. McCormick convinced everyone that there need be no failures if adequate protection to homegrown sugars continues and close attention to costs of production are watched by factory employees and officials. The new owners solicited even more beet acreages from the farmers and were very successful. Unlike the acre or two that the farmers initially promised in the very beginning of the sugar beet venture, they now offered up to 60 to 70 acres of their land for growing beets. My grandpa did too. Our family had plenty of sugar beets that we grew. Progress continued, and in 1928, the Parker Harvester Company from Cedarburg had plans to make 300 machines that could harvest 3 acres of sugar beets a day with one man, doing the work formerly done by 18 men or 40 boys and girls. This machine could dig up, top, pile beets all in one operation. These machines would be leased out at $7 an acre and could harvest any root crop, and was expected to be very useful in the potato district. Here we go. Louis Gettleman from Germantown also invented a beet harvester. He made a few machines and tested them out, but the clay soil here made harvesting the beets, lifting, topping, and piling very difficult. But he did sell the patent to a firm in Salt Lake City who continued to make the machines. So with the development of these and other machines, there would be no more need for beet gangs. School children and adults would have to find work elsewhere. The Menomonee River Sugar Company of Menomonee, Michigan, bought and gambled on the enterprise in 1924 and remained in business through 1930. The plant closed in 1931 and their operation was transferred to Green Bay. A bondholder suit, here, and even the Wisconsin Sugar Company, they even had their own railroad car. The Wisconsin Sugar Company. I thought that was pretty cool. A bondholder suit brought the foreclosure against the company, and it was sold at public auction at the foot of the main stairway of the courthouse at Waukesha, the 12th of February, 1932, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. A New York broker bought the factory buildings and their contents for $40 $50,000. Our local sugar beet plant changed hands no less than 5 times since it was built and also stood idle for a number of years. But at one time, the Blatz family thought to turn it into a brewery called Blatz Falls. But unfortunately, that never materialized. The first year of operation produced only 1 barrel of sugar and was a failure before it even got a start. When R.G. Wagner took over, it could slice between 200 and 250 tons a day. Wagner enlarged the plant and doubled that number. When the Menomonee River Sugar Company took over, its capacity was once more doubled and many improvements were made. With the exception of when Adam Gettleman and then Curtis Frater was operating the plant, all others met with financial reverses that resulted in either closing the factory or a change in ownership. The A.A. Farley Company of Chicago were in possession during World War I and reported profits that ran into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Farley was the one who imported the Cuban sugar cane. Now, after that was when there was a sharp decline in the price of raw and refined sugar, the largest drop in 30 years, which led to that company's collapse. The losses at the time were close to $1 million, which would be like 18 million today. It wasn't only the factory owners who sustained these losses. The beet growers, the factory and field workers, the local merchants, they were all caught up in the turmoil. In October of 1939, while the building was in the process of being torn down, the old landmark, for some unknown reason, preferred to burn itself down rather than be demolished. It started in the press room. There were several acetylene tanks, which supplied the torches used to cut down the large beams of the building. The firemen worked diligently to prevent those flames from spreading to other tanks, lest a severe explosion occur. 1,200 feet of hose, the longest line ever laid by local firemen, were used in the firefighting process. It took all afternoon until at least 6 p.m. to put it out. It's supposed that one of the acetylene torches that was resting on a wood beam may have caused a flame and spread to the rest of the old dry wood. After cleanup and the rest of the demolition, all but the warehouse and smokestack were razed. The steel went to Japan. Bricks were salvaged from the 5-story main refinery and were used in the construction of many local houses and buildings, including the breezeway over at St. Mary's Church. In April 1961 saw the fall of the last remnant of the old sugar beet factory. The chimney plummeted to the ground after its steel reinforcing rods were cut by the demolition crew. The stack fell in a westerly direction towards the Menomonee River. 1961. In the picture here, you can see the piles of brick and rubble form an outline of the stack as it embedded itself in the earth after being toppled by the 2-man wrecking crew. Hello? The base, at least it's not me. Mine was going off before. The base of the chimney was weakened on the west side to prevent the stack from falling on nearby buildings. The warehouse still stands today and is now part of Middle West Manufacturing. Thank you, Laverne. Thank you. And the office was bought by Sherman Gessert, who sold it to the AMVETs. And now it's the what? KC Hall. Yep, next one. There, you got your driver's license there. Otto Schneider? Yep. And I guess they did just remodel. I don't have a picture of the new building. Okay, next one. In the fall of 1889, the Milwaukee and Superior Railroad was built in Menomonee Falls, bringing new commercial and industrial prosperity. This gave a new momentum to our village. It handled 4 passenger trains daily and shipped local products such as stone, lime, ice, milk, and sugar beets. Its track was 14 miles long. The first years, the train was operated between North Lake and Sussex. Later, it ran to Milwaukee in the mornings, as far as Granville in the afternoon. On Sundays, it went to Milwaukee in the morning and returned in the evening. Our very first freight shipped from the falls on the new railway, it was a carload of agricultural machinery which was run to the town of Granville without the assistance of a locomotive. While coming down the grade west of town, 5 cars of stone broke away from the train And these struck the car of implements, and just by the momentum, shoved that car nearly 2.5 miles down the track. Amusing now, back then not so much. Milk was put on daily and shipped to Milwaukee. Many students from Northlake, Merton, Sussex, and Lannon commuted daily this way to Menomonee Falls High School. The baggage car and 2 coaches were crowded many times with folks standing because there was no more room to sit. I love this picture. Okay, and the next. There we go. Now this is Alonzo Ridgway. This is Alonzo Ridgway right here, and this is him and his wife. I just stuck that in because I think they're just such a cute little couple. Alonzo and his wife. So now the horse and wagon here were owned by the Civil War veteran Alonzo Ridgway. He hauled baggage and mail from the post office, and he met the train. He also provided a taxi service for passengers and their baggage. The depot agent for many years was George Lewes. E.A. Cummings was engineer. Joseph Hargraves was baggage man. Mr. Gallagher was roundhouse tender at Lannon. And Jack Roberts, also from Lannon, was the fireman. The scooter car, oops, too fast. Back up. There we go. The scooter car here, that was used by the section men, was run by August Glassnap. Garwin Mace, our first village president, promoted the construction of railroad known as Menomonee Falls and Western. And we'll talk about him in a minute. Eventually, the Milwaukee, Menomonee Falls, and Western Railway was incorporated, and a spur line soon connected with tracks used by the Milwaukee and St. Paul, the Chicago, Northwestern, and the Sioux lines. Okay, now I've got a couple pictures from World War I. Here we are. So you can see the sugar beet factory in the back. And here's the depot. You can just catch the falls from Menomonee Falls. You've got a train right here, got another track. We're shipping equipment for World War I. You can see all the people, kid with a bike in the front there. Isn't that neat? Got a war poster out in front. Okay, next one. Same day. Here we got a couple of the guys, I don't know if they're going to or coming from. Got some more equipment on there. A couple of the boys, got one of the soldiers on horses. Pretty cool pictures. Okay. In 1973, the depot was moved to Old Falls Village, and that's where you can see it now. Yep. And now it's being repurposed as a local history museum. Okay. Every winter, after the river froze, the men of the village would take cross-cut saws and tongs and harvest the ice on the river. And after being cut, the blocks of ice were loaded into sleds and taken to the insulated ice houses, okay, where they were buried in sawdust to keep from melting. And they were kept there until the iceman made his rounds in summer. The harvesting had to be done upstream of the sugar beet processing factory because the rotted beet pulp and other pollutants released by the factory into the river didn't really make for very good ice. In earlier years, when the ice was cut farther south on the mill pond, it is said that a heavily laden sled broke through the ice and it drowned both the driver and the horses. How sad. Another nice picture with the sugar beet factory in back. Look at that stack. Years later, after the whole thing went down, when we were kids and we'd be skating on the river, you could still see the smokestack. That was so cool. Okay. Now, before refrigerators, there were ice boxes in homes that kept the food from spoiling. Huge pieces of ice kept the unit cool, and a tray at the bottom of the ice box was removed daily, which contained water that was collected from melted ice. In the early years of the 20th century, there were 7 very active and thriving hotels situated within a 6-block span touching Main Street or Water Street. The Nelson, the Eagle, the Gettleman, the Monitor, the Menomonee, the East Side, and the Empire. In bar rooms, you could find a double-door ice box. At the top, ice was stored, and below, soda and beer were kept cool in bottles. Chips of ice were chopped off of the large chunks and inserted into a smaller unit, covering copper pipes leading to the keg of beer tapped in the basement. This method was used to keep the beer cool and fresh tasting. Now, as we continue our excursion down the river, but before we cross under the 3rd Street Bridge, Roosevelt Bridge to you out-of-towners, we're going to run into a long-standing business on the west side of the river. On March 18, 1892, the same day as the village charter was recorded, William Connell bought land and soon after built the sheds and office for his lumber yard. Mr. Connell sold the yard to Mr. Jacob B. Whitaker less than a year later on January 3, 1893. And in 1910, Jacob distributed a calendar with a winter scene from Colgate. It depicted a timber scene with horses, men, sleighs, and logs as they were shipped from Thomas Lilly's timber tract and purchased by Jacob. If anybody ever comes across that calendar, please let me know. Whitaker operated the yard until 1918 when he sold it to the Wilbur Lumber Company. And they in turn sold it to the Loring Lumber Company in 1922. And Dardis Lumber and Fuel Company purchased the business on February 1924. Art Jacobson was born in Burlington, Wisconsin, in the house that his grandfather built. He went to grade school and high school there, and he took a short 3-month course in agriculture in Madison. He worked the family farm until January 1912, when he started to learn the lumber business with the Dardis Lumber Company in Burlington. Okay, Art Jacobson and Elsie Dardis were married that June. That business was sold in January of 1924, and Art came to Menomonee Falls to manage the yard here. At the end of June 1924, the large lumber shed at the yard was complete, and it extended through the center of the yard over 150 feet and provided ample room for storage of building materials and to protect the lumber from the effects of the sun, wind, and rain. And we actually have, Jim is going to show you, we've got one of the aprons supplied by my cousin Skip. Thank you, Skip. Isn't that cool? H.G. Dardis died in 1930, and ownership of the yard passed on to his daughter, Elsie Jacobson. So here's Jacobson Lumber in the days that we remember. And what happened to it after that? Oh, boy, the ads really changed. Check that out. I don't think Whitaker could have got away with that in the 1920s. There you go. And what was it after Jacobson? Anybody remember? What was it after Jacobson's? It was Nye's Lumberyard. Wasn't it?
Jacobson was apartments after they went out. Nye's was down the street. When my dad started the lumberyard Nye's, he couldn't build the falls.
Okay.
Because Jacobson was there. So we built in the town of Menomonee Falls, where on Water Street was the town of Menomonee Falls at the time. When we built. And then
Where was it on Water Street?
Annexed it to where, see, the sugar beet factory was originally in the town of Menomonee Falls.
Yeah.
Out of the village.
Yeah.
And when my dad wanted to start a lumberyard, he was out of the falls. He had German time, he was out of the falls with Jacobson. So
Oh.
we built in the town of Menomonee Falls,
Where they are now?
where the sugar beet factory was,
Okay.
on Water Street.
Okay.
And that was, I can't remember the year it started, and now it's Southwest right now. But after Jacobson sold, they drove apartments there.
Oh, there you go. And now Nye's is just west a little bit. Now it's west. Yeah, yeah. Wow, cool. Okay. What a neat picture. I love the 3rd Street Bridge. As we head south, make sure you duck while we cross under the 3rd Street Bridge. Ready? 1, 2, 3, duck. Okay. This bridge was constructed in 1899 to provide better access to the railroad depot and the Water Street Industrial and Commercial District on the east side of the river. Now, these buildings right here, at the time that this was taken in the 1920, this was Wilbur Lumber Yard at the time. Next. Now, until this bridge was constructed, all depot-bound traffic was forced to pass through the busy downtown and cross the Menomonee River at Main Street. Now, this building right here, that was one of the bars. That was the Empire Hotel back in the day. Schranz? Well, Empire before. And then eventually turned into Old Lamp Inn. Now, when I was in high school, that's when they changed the 18-year drinking. I knew a lot of kids that went there for lunch that day. Made for an interesting afternoon in high school, let me tell you. Not me. Oh, no. Clutch my pearls. Never. I just love this picture. I love this 3rd Street picture. This is just great. Look at that. There's no railing, no nothing. And you see right up on top here, we got the red brick church. That's the red brick, the Methodist Church. Isn't that excellent? You just kind of see a little bit of the lumber company there. Beautiful. Now, originally constructed of ashlar limestone with low sloping stone railings and two identical semicircular arches, the 3rd Street Bridge stayed in use until 1996, just 3 years short of 100 years, when it was reconstructed to expand Roosevelt Drive. At least the new bridge replicated the double arch design of the original bridge. As we drift along our lazy river downstream, looking to your right on the west side of the river, but right before we come to Jessie Nay's house, we're going to see the Huberty family home and blacksmith shop. John Huberty was the son of George and Mary Huberty. He was born in Brookfield in a log cabin on West Capitol Drive in 1873, and he came from a family of 15 children who were orphaned at an early age. He didn't have much formal education, only up to 5th or 6th grade, but he learned a lot by reading and listening to the radio. He had a great deal of common sense. He worked for his father for a while in the mason trade, building stone basements for houses and barns. Later, they built several churches, which still stand today in Heartland, Lannon, and Pewaukee. He then went to Milwaukee to learn the blacksmithing trade. Coming to Menomonee Falls when he was 18, he worked for John Fye, one of the village blacksmiths. And John Fye will be in the next presentation, part 3. 6 years later, he had William Gessert build him his own blacksmith shop for $300. His home and a blacksmith shop were on Grand Avenue, just behind and north of Jessie Nay's house. And just a little bit north of where the Associated Bank is now, it's the condos or whatever it is there. Part of what became the bank parking lot. That was all his land. Ida Moss was born in Milwaukee, but spent most of her time in Menomonee Falls. She was a millinery designer and had a shop in George Gessert's house. Ida married John at 5 in the afternoon on Thanksgiving Day in 1900. The ceremony was at Ida's parents' house. She wore a gown of brown silk and she had a veil. After the ceremony, everyone enjoyed a wedding breakfast. Ida and John immediately took up residence in their house next to the blacksmith shop. Besides his blacksmith business, now he was village president for a while. This was his village president picture. And besides his blacksmith business, John held many village offices. He was, in 1897, the village marshal. 1910, he was elected vice president. He was that for 3 years. 1917 to 18, he was village assessor. In 1924, he was the village president for 3 years. 1940, he was again elected village assessor. John operated his blacksmith shop for about 30 years and set many of the local wagons with steel rims as well as shoeing horses, and the price in those days was 50 cents a shoe. Next. Now Delmar, we got Delmar with a shoe. James has that shoe from the Historical Society. Delmar on the right was the son of John Huberty, and he donated an oversized horseshoe that his father John had made as an apprentice in the 1890s. That's how old that horseshoe is. Dr. Harvey Triller's on the left. He was the president of the Historical Society at the time. I can't imagine how big that horse must have been. I hope it was just for show. Okay. So when John Huberty. John Huberty. He lived right along the river. Even when I was a kid, I remember some of the greenhouses. We're going to talk about that. So when horseshoeing and blacksmithing became too strenuous, he rented out the shop, and in 1918, he built 2 greenhouses on Grand Avenue property and was a florist for the next 21 years. And his son, Del, learned the floral design and also helped in the business. We had J.J. Huberty and son. Yeah, roses, carnations, sweet peas, everything. Now, there's their family picture. John and Ida had 5 surviving children. From left to right, we've got Ida, Adele, Ben, Agnes, and John. The 2 in the front are Anita and Delmore. All the children graduated from our local high school. They did have a baby who was named Herbert. He died at 2 months old, and he's buried at Sunnyside Cemetery. Okay? Now, Ben. He was the oldest boy. He graduated in 1922 and was senior class president. He studied up in Appleton at Lawrence College in July of 1927. He took a job as supervisor of membership and overseer of older boys at the La Crosse YMCA. It was said his college training and his natural abilities gave him an advantage to handle such work. In 1931, he married Mary Ellen Washburn. He divorced her in 1936 and then remarried her in 1939. Make up your mind. In 1942, when he registered for the draft, he was 40 years old. Ben was 6 foot tall and 210 pounds. He had a ruddy complexion with blonde hair and blue eyes. Ben and Mary Ellen lived in Hubertus, and he worked at the Lewis Alice Company on Stewart Street in Milwaukee. He died in Kenosha at the age of 72. Delmore, Del, who was also nicknamed Ponzi, graduated in 1926 and was class cheerleader. When Delmore was a sophomore, he played center on the basketball team. That's him up here. He played center on the basketball team that brought home second place in the Milwaukee District Tournament. This team was so amazing. The whole community turned out to see them play. Stores closed. People left their homes to follow these boys who showed such fight. According to our local paper, the village was basketball mad, and no conversation could be carried on which people did not refer to the games. The paper also predicted a rosy future for basketball in our village, at least as far as attendance was concerned. At an end of the season banquet given by the cooking girls at school, Delmore was elected captain for the upcoming year. And here's another picture of the basketball team. That's Delmore on the end. Nice unis, guys. Cute. And next, we have in May of 1927, Delmore with his dance partner Viola Colby won $15 as best waltzer at the Wisconsin Roof Gardens Waltz Contest. Boy, I wonder if the basketball helped with that. I don't know. And then, after that, in 1931, the Menomonee Falls News held a subscription contest, and he won 5th place. His prize was a baby grand Philco radio. Woohoo! And also in 1937, he actually made a run to be police chief. He actually got 230 votes and was second to the last on the bottom, so he didn't do very well. Dell became well known as a Menomonee Falls archer by 1954, and he was one of the officials at the annual Wisconsin Field Archery Association tournament held in Two Rivers. Delmore lived to be 73. Adele, this is Adele, the 4th child, graduated in 1926, the same year as her brother Delmore. She was class vice president and played the saxophone in the high school band. She never married, and she died at 91 and shares a plot with her sister Agnes. And next we have Anita. I could not for the life of me, Ellen and I looked, we could not find a high school graduation picture for her. She was the youngest and graduated in 1929, and she married Roy Gates. But the year before they married, Roy went on a 6-day trip up north with 4 of his friends, Harry, Bill, Arthur Sprink, and Burton Holmes. They went fishing up in Eagle River and caught 45 bluegills, averaging 1.5 pounds apiece, several trout, and a 15-pound muskie that broke the line. They came home by way of Madison and hit some hills that made our big hill look like a bump in the road. They said one hill was so steep and so long that they had to turn their flivver around and go in reverse in order that the gas could enter the carburetor. Outside of punctures and flat tires that were too numerous to mention, the young men had a wonderful trip and saw some beautiful scenery. Anita and Roy never had any children. Roy died at 82, and Anita lived to be 97. Next, we have Agnes. The oldest girl, born after Ben, was probably their most accomplished child. The summer before Agnes started her junior year, the high school caught fire and burnt down. That next school year was spent taking classes wherever there was room in the falls, and she made it through. Agnes graduated in 1921, a year before Ben, her older brother. She was in the very first graduating class of the newly completed Menomonee Falls High School, the Lincoln School, which opened the fall of 1920. Like her brother Ben, Agnes was class president her senior year. Now Agnes, only 2 years later, she completed a 4-year course at the Wisconsin Conservatory of Dramatic Art. She then started teaching, offering classes to anyone in the Falls who wished to take them. In September of 1923, Agnes had her picture in the Milwaukee Journal along with a write-up about her recital at the Methodist Episcopal Church. Along with her teaching, she continued to study elocution and expression at the Wisconsin State University. In 1927, Agnes was enrolled at Lawrence College in Appleton and was a member of the first ever women's debate team at that college. The abolition of the American jury trial system was the subject debated. She was on the team for 2 years and earned a forensic gold L for Lawrence College for her debating skills, honorary dramatic gold key and silver L from the Tau Kappa Alpha honorary fraternity was also awarded to her. By September 1933, Agnes had a job in the research department at Montgomery Ward down in Gadsden, Alabama. She wrote a letter back home telling of the intense heat in Alabama. She also mentioned how the cotton fields looked snow white and how she picked cotton for a diversion for a short while. I think I could have found something else to do. In August of 1936, amidst the Great Depression, Agnes came back home. Under the pen name of Gratian Maroff, she wrote a book. For copies of that book, the paper said to refer to the ad on page 8. How to get a job in these times. Well, if you don't have a job, you're right about getting a job. She tells of her experiences in obtaining jobs for herself, as well as the job hunting experiences of others. She wrote that you have to follow a definite technique when you're job hunting. You have to know how to sell yourself. She also mentions the mistake most often made by job hunters and how to know what to say in an interview. The book cost 50 cents, and you could buy one at the Falls News office. Agnes never married and lived to be 78. Back to Dad. In February of 1924, Falls villagers noticed a good-sized orange tree in John Huberty's greenhouse. This orange tree had borne several dozen nice oranges so far that winter and was in blossom again. How wonderful. Mr. and Mrs. Huberty celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in December of 1925. Bless you. There was a surprise party with music, cards, and dancing at Minton's Hall at the Four Corners. The Menomonee Falls News reported an interesting sight on John's lawn in September of 1933. Pedestrians walking down Grand Avenue in the village have their attention attracted by a novel miniature dwelling on the lawn of John J. Huberty, local florist. The work is cleverly done, the materials being used for the sidewalks being a honeycombed slag, while the gables are finished with pieces of polished marble. The roof is of a conventional fireproof variegated roofing. With its curtained windows and cement porches, it presents a substantial and picturesque home on a small scale. Skill and patience, as well as selection of materials, played a large part in its construction. John was very interested in the preservation of nature and was against the village when they started to fill in part of the Tamarack Swamp. He insisted the swamp was there for a purpose. It was a way of holding water after a heavy rain, and that would help avoid flooding in the village. He knew that area well and might have had an ulterior motive for wanting to keep the swamp the way it was, as that was his favorite hunting place. Their residence and greenhouses on Grand Avenue were sold in February 1940 to a man from Chicago who took over the floral business. John retired, and they moved to West Main Street to take a much-needed rest from their years of hard work. That building was later torn down when Shady Lane was developed. Ida died in December of 1951, and John passed in August of 58. When John Huberty passed, he was one of the last 3 Menomonee Falls residents who were adults when the village was incorporated back in 1892. So now if you look right from where the Huberty blacksmith shop was, just across the street there on the corner on Grand Avenue, you should be able to still catch a glimpse of the home of Garwin Mace and his family. Garwin Adolph Mace was born in Browns Corners in Dodge County on April 5th, 1851, to parents who were natives of New York State. Next. He married Miss Elizabeth Fratinger, March 11th, 1874, and together they had 6 daughters. Left to right, we have Leona, Marion, Ursula, Irma, Bessie, and Viola, also known as Vida, to her classmates. In 1890, he came with his family to Menomonee Falls, where he ultimately organized the Marble Gloss Lime Company. In April of 1892, Menomonee Falls had its very first election, and Garwin Mace was elected our very first village president. He lived on Grand Avenue in one of the grandest houses of the time. The Grand Avenue neighborhood on the west side of the river was developed about 1886 as the first subdivision of the original village plat, and that was about 43 years after the Water Street neighborhood across the river was started. The land originally was part of the Jesse Mays farm. The Grand Avenue neighborhood reflected the prosperity of the late 19th century and early 20th centuries. Grand Avenue was a prestigious address for village merchants and professionals and was noted for its large homes and spacious landscaped lots. He also had this beautiful summer home in Grafton where he and his family could spend some time and relax. So starting on the left is Irma. She's seated at the tea party table. Then we have Elizabeth, Garwin's wife. Charlie Schlafer, how did he get in there? He's riding his bicycle. He was actually Bessie's boyfriend. Oh, that's Bessie. And they would eventually marry. Viola, or Vida, is in between Charlie and Bessie. Bessie and Charlie must have gone riding, or maybe they just came back from riding. We don't know. Ursula is sitting on the steps, and Garwin is standing next to the ponies. And Marion and Leona are in the carts. They're probably waiting for the photographer to finish so they could go for a ride. Menomonee Falls. What better place was suited for Garwin to live with his wife and his daughters? Another family pick. In the back, we have Viola, Irma, Ursula, and Bessie. In front, we have Marion, Garwin, Elizabeth, and Leona. The girls were all very popular in school. As an adult, Reverend Samuel wrote about his childhood memories of Menomonee Falls in a letter that he submitted to the local paper. In it, he wrote, "I recall Vida Mace on her first day in school. She had a pompadour style of hair. All the boys perked up at the new student, and she became quite a belle. She had a beautiful style of writing. Her father had just come to build lime kilns in the falls. Bessie, a sister, was more modest than Vida, but they both brought new life into the school." So Viola Lavilla Mace was the eldest daughter. She completed a course at Milwaukee Spencerian Business College, and for a number of years, she was a valued assistant as a bookkeeper for her father and his lime business. When her sister Irma got sick and died, she got legal guardianship of the 4 children. Viola never married and died in 1923 at age 47 from cancer. After graduating from the local high school, Bessie Bell was a teacher. She taught kindergarten in the 3rd Ward in Milwaukee for 7 years. She later married Charles Schlafer, son of Simon Peter and Sarah Nee Leister, daughter of Friedrich Nays, at 2 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day in 1907, uniting 2 of the most prominent families in the village. They had 3 girls and a boy. Bessie died at 44. Irma Elizabeth also graduated from our local high school and went on to graduate from the Northwestern School of Oratory. She married Alpha Ira Ruby, and they had 4 children, 3 boys and a girl. Now, during the Depression, everybody was broke. But that was a personal matter, and everybody made the most of what they had. No one had any money. But there was no breadlines here because everybody had a garden. They canned. They preserved everything they could. The government loaned seeds. And recreation was going to church or to the village baseball games. Nobody was better or worse off than the next fella. Now, when Irma and Alpha got married, just as the Depression hit, they deposited $1,000 in a Hartford bank on Friday. By Monday, they were told it was all gone. They moved in with her parents. Alpha died at 33 when their youngest boy, Glenn, was just a baby. 6 years later, Irma died at 39, and the children became legal wards of Irma's sister, Viola. Now, Ursula Winifred married Archibald Pike. Nope, we're way ahead. We're way ahead. Nope, back. Back. There we go, yeah. Ursula Winifred married Archibald Pike in 1907. She wore a gown of Alice blue silk trimmed with heavy ecru lace. The Mace home was decorated with tulips, apple blossoms, and lilies of the valley. In 1924, Archie opened up the Quality Meat Market and Delicatessen store on West Main Street, opposite the Citizens State Bank. He handled only the best meats and also carried a select and fresh supply of canned and prepared meats, fish, and such delicacies as go with a modern shop. Archie was also the pike in the Held and Pike store. So do we know which store that was? It was up on the Four Corners, the Held's Cash store. It was Held and Pike. Now it's the Lunchbox. So they had 2 girls and 2 boys. Archie died in 1963, and Ursula died 14 years later at 91. When Marion May turned 18 in 1908, there was a tremendous birthday party for her and Clarence Blair, who was also celebrating his birthday. Marion's sister Viola was chaperone for the event. It was held at Blair's Cafe, relative of Clarence, I don't know, where cake and ice cream were served, and it was an early evening costume party. Guests arrived as fairyland characters, farm milkmaids. There was even a Queen of Hearts. Now, the boys' dress was equally spectacular with continental costumes and a knight of the road. Marion became a nurse and subsequently took a course in chiropractic. She was married twice, the first time to Roland Lenzner in 1919 and the second time to Herbert Kirchner in 1923. She had no children, and she died at 38 years of age. Now we've got Leona. Leona Alberta married her high school classmate Forrest Weeks. They married in 1912 and were dairy farmers in the town of Lisbon. They had 2 children and a boy. Forrest died at age 36, and Leona remarried Frederick Polwarth. Leona died at 63 years of age. On January 5th, 1919, after a long illness lasting 5 years, Garwin died at age 67. His wife Elizabeth survived him by almost 20 years. She died at the age of 83 after a 4-month battle with cancer. They're both buried up at Sunnyside Cemetery along with 3 of their daughters, Viola, Irma, and Marion. Okay? And Garwin belonged to the Freemasons. Modern Woodmen and Eastern Star. Where'd you go? Oh, wait, you're on? Okay. And Elizabeth was active in the Order of the Eastern Star and was past matron of the Aurora chapter. Although he was not a member, Garwin attended and contributed to the support of the Methodist Episcopal Church. In all respects, he was a broad-minded, energetic, and a reliable citizen, a tireless worker, and an indulgent husband and father. So now I don't know about you, but we're headed towards the falls, and I'm not brave enough to go over the falls in this little dinghy we're in. So we're just going to paddle over to the mill. We're going to get out. We're going to walk across the road. We're going to go behind Honing and Lowe's clothing shop, which is now A.J. O'Brady's. And we're going to pick up the trail after that. Stuck a little dinghy down in the river down that way. Next, we've got, this is Garwin Mace, our very first village president. That's the picture we use. When he was a young man, Garwin became interested in the lime business with Charles Rudebush of Mayville. After moving to the Falls, he worked at the existing lime kilns for Messrs. Dent and Hastings. As supervisor of their business, Garwin then brought that property from 2 men, and in April of 1891, he started work on expanding the massive lime kilns. Look at that. Can you see the guys? We got some horses over here. We got guys here, got guys across the way. A large number of men were employed, and the plant was enlarged, and sidings were laid to the kilns. The dimensions were 20 feet square and 40 feet high. A trestle work was built across the river, upon which rock would be elevated from the quarries to the top, and it would eventually be run by water power. And next we got a little close-up. See, here's the trestle. Here's the river. The trestle went over the river. You can see the top of the kilns right there. Okay, and the next one, there we go. There's the real close-up. You can see a real good one with the trestle going across the river. Isn't that something? Mace was a practical lime man and systematically went about to acquire the greatest amount of capacity with the least possible amount of expenditure. He saw no reason why his business would not be a huge success, and he was correct. And he became one of the richest men ever in this village. Now, while under construction, the drilling and blasting brought up the finest building rock, ranging in dimensions from 4 to 20 inches in thickness. It was superior to any building rock in Waukesha County. They got the stone ready for market in just a few weeks. By June, Mace commenced active operation of his lime plant. The property consisted of 5 1/8 acres of the finest lime rock in the vicinity of the falls proper. By persistent effort, he secured the right-of-way for a spur line from the main road down to the kilns. He harnessed the ample water power and also put in an air compressor. Okay? He built 6 mammoth kilns, 2 enclosed in each of the structures of the ruins that still stand today. So here you can see his kilns that he built. There's St. Mary's in the back there. So we're coming from the backside. These kilns are the old ones that Friedrich Naes built way back in the day when he first settled the downtown. Even by the time I was a kid, there was nothing left but rubble. But I'm glad we got a picture of that. These were the largest in the state, and they were built with all the modern improvements. He employed 75 men and secured the largest contract for lime ever effected in this state. 200,000 barrels to Chicago parties. This property cost him $4,500, and in less than 1 year, he sold half an interest for $25,000. And he formed an incorporate company with a capital stock of $50,000 known as the Mace Marble Gloss Lime Company. Now there was that trestle work that was built across the river which went up and over the top of all three kilns, and it was traveled by an ore cart. The raw limestone was dumped from the cart into the kiln chimney where the extreme heat converted it into the powdery mortar. There were fairly wide iron necks at the top of each kiln which narrowed into the chimney portion. Garwin also developed a patent. I can't make heads or tails of it. I don't know if you can, but this is his patent. Pretty cool, 1890. And next we have a picture of the guts of the lime kilns. Actually, this was the oven for the calcining of the lime. This was a process by which a mineral is oxidized by heating instead of direct burning. On August 10th of 1892, at 7:30 in the morning, Nick Marks, foreman at the Mace Lime Kilns, was walking the platform on the east side of the kilns. The workday had only half begun, and only a half an hour before, the kilns were already burning at full heat. There were 3 carts of stone that had been hauled over the trestle. They were waiting to be added to the 40 barrels of lime already burning at the bottom. There's a platform extending along the east side of the kilns, and the center of the kilns is divided with a track and cable wire. 2 men were pushing a stone car when Nick stepped onto the edge of the kiln and walked around, at the same time bending over, looking into the kiln to see if the fire brick was burnt out. In walking onto the plaster of the wall, which was wet from the rain the night before, his foot slipped, and he fell into the seething mass of flames, and he met instant death. And there's his obituary. Very sad. Left a wife and children. Next, there was a very large iron oil drum near the kilns where the fuel was stored. This is a picture of the fire that partially destroyed our kilns. A couple of young boys back then thought it was a good idea to throw a match on the oil surrounding this huge oil tank at the Mace plant. Oh, kids these days, again. I wonder if those boys ever fessed up or if they ever caught them. I never found out. This conflagration was so bad it threatened the village. So with that fire and Nick Mark's death, and with a declining market because block and lumber were fast becoming choice building materials, they closed the business down in 1892. Okay, here we are at the lime kilns. Hey, they still have their top. Does anybody know the significance of these falls? That's Menomonee Falls. It's not the falls on Main Street. A lot of people think it's the falls on Main Street. It is not. It's these falls right here next to the lime kilns. Garwin sold this and his business in Germantown in April of 1913 to Philip Kramer of Rockfield. During the next few years, the lime kiln area was being used as a dump site by some residents. And by March of 1915, a notice was put in the local paper, letting the villagers know that all the refuse in that area was to be saturated with oil and burned. Dumping would no longer be permitted, and anyone caught doing so would be prosecuted. During the First World War, all of the iron was stripped off the kilns and the oil drum was carried away for scrap metal that was used to further the war effort. Ah, that looks familiar. Here you can still see